Going live.
Live streaming is
Oh,
on.
whoa, that was like the radio
Live.
commercial.
Yeah, live streaming is going on. Okay, so we're live streaming. Hopefully, I'll be able to share the link with you afterwards in via email if you want to go back to any of this stuff. And I'm going to share my screen so we can see the slide deck. It's going to be awesome. All right, I'm hoping you can see my slides. Yeah.
Mhm.
Fantastic. All right, so that's the main thing. All right, so today's the rest of the wheel. Over the last couple of weeks, Camille led us on a conversation about questions. We talked about personal emotional needs and why people buy or don't buy in the first place. So we've had a lot of really good conversations about that. So today we're going to talk about the rest of the wheel. And what I mean is it's going to be from questions where we wrapped up into personal emotional needs. And we're going to talk about things like resources, time, energy, and money. We're going to talk about budgets and how to have money conversations that tend to make people uncomfortable.
Hey, Robert, I don't see you anymore.
That's going to happen when I turn off my, when we share the screen. Unfortunately, it doesn't share both of me and the slide deck, so I apologize.
Last time you were able to do something, so I was just checking.
If I can figure out, I will, but I don't know that I can, other than stop sharing when we get there. Okay, so we're going to talk about those things, about money and time and energy. And then we're also going to talk about what their selection process is to know how to set up the rest of the sale. That said, I will tell you that I spend most of my time, not all of my time, but most of my time talking about pains, personal emotional needs, pleasures, things that ideally how things would work out if things were better. And very little time do I end up spending on things like time, energy, and money and resources. Very little time do I spend on selection process. And I'll give you the questions that I ask, but I want you to, if we focus most of our time focused on the personal emotional needs, the fish basically jump in the boat. So a couple quick slides. One is taking a sip from the fire hose. I'm going to give you a lot of information today. I want to give you some key questions to be able to ask and blast through this. And we are not going to get through all of the slides today. Just not going to happen. And we're going to come back and wrap up next week what happens after the sale and setting up the referral process and maybe even getting to a thing I call circle of trust to make sure you're getting a good amount of at least names and introductions flowing your way. So key mindset number one is you're going to be taking a sip from a fire hose. I'm going to give you more information than you probably want or need today. Hopefully you'll take one or two things and run with it. The other thing is this slide is one of my favorites about growing your brain. We all have habit patterns built into our brain, or what they're called habit loops. And essentially our brains develop ruts. In order for us to process information very quickly, we make assumptions about the world around us so we don't have to use up a whole lot of brain power. Right? Has anybody ever been stuck in a rut before? Mm-hmm. Similar habit patterns or thought loops. Parker and I talked about one the other day on a phone call about making cold calls. Now, what does every salesperson on the planet pretty much say when they make cold calls, except for people on this call? What do they say when they make that first introduction?
Yeah,
they might mutter a little bit. They usually go, "Hi, how are you today?" Yep, that's it. And they're told to be super upbeat and positive. And Parker, I had some fun at Parker's expense yesterday because we set him up with a new habit pattern, which says, first name, did I catch you at a bad time? Right? Because the prospect doesn't have an answer for that. They haven't heard that a million times, so they don't have a pattern. So it's interrupting their traditional pattern. The problem with that is, as salespeople, we have our own pattern. So we normally say, "Hey, how are you today?" We're all positive and upbeat, right? Well, the prospect has an answer for that. Who is this? What are you calling about? Are you a salesperson? Click. So it was really a struggle for Parker to shift gears and just go first name, did I catch you at a bad time? Fair, Parker? Without making you, too uncomfortable? And it was just,
okay.
What's that?
I said no, you're all good. Definitely
Okay.
Rotating from just talking to people in general, using different terms, like it's because it's just like second sense. So just like we talked about basically just a strategy of getting out of a habit to starting a new one.
Yeah, absolutely. Was it tough just to switch from going, "Hey, how are you?" to "Did I catch you at a bad time?"
Yeah, I mean, especially off the bat, like making a little outline and stuff definitely helps, especially if you're going to be doing that. Like just so you read it a couple more times and then you call them, and it's like already starts ingraining in your brain. But like if you just sit there and call somebody and don't even think about it, your instinct is to just be, "Oh, hey, how are you doing today?
I love it.
What's going on?"
So it was fun to watch, and not at Parker's expense, but to see how thoroughly ingrained a lot of our patterns are. So even in your own very own sales process, there's probably a lot of patterns that you've accumulated over years and years and years of being around salespeople, around being a salesperson, around how we communicate with other people. So a lot of things that I teach are very non-natural. They're unnatural. Right? That's not how we normally communicate. So it can be tough. My point is this: is it's okay to suck, just don't master it. In fact, on our Bold CEOs group, one of our mantras is, "Hey, next month, just suck less." Just suck less. It's going to be tough. We're going to do some things. We're going to make some mistakes. We're going to say the wrong thing. That's okay. Just next month, let's get a little bit better. And I have this theory that there's no such thing as a quantum leap. Is anybody familiar with an overnight success? Anybody ever heard of, "Hey, that guy or that girl was an overnight success"? Mm-hmm. How often does that really happen, that somebody was an overnight success? That yesterday they knew absolutely nothing, and today, boom. Never. What really happened was years and years and years worth of work and hard effort and maybe even an unrelated role, but they were becoming the person they are today to have that quantum leap. Does that make sense? Okay, so give yourself time to suck. It's okay. Let's just get better. And to Parker's point, let's get an outline and practice the daylights out of it so that when we need it, it's what is natural to us, not unnatural. So there's all the stuff we're going to talk about. This is reviewing questions. It says how to avoid being that hippo salesperson that has all mouth and no ears. Is simply just asking questions, with the goal being to achieve an 80-20 ratio of listening is 80% and talking is 20%. Yep, Deb?
I'm sorry?
I saw a giggle there. I didn't know if that was related.
No. I'm sorry, I apologize.
No worries. So the only ways to do that, there's A, B, C, and D, really, is ask questions and shut up, listen, and take notes. And then whatever the prospect gives us, we just ask clarifying questions. And I gave you a hack. Does anybody remember the hack that I gave you a couple of months ago when we talked about asking questions for growing rapport?
Use their last 3 words and turn them into a question.
Yes.
There you go. So if I'm asking follow-up questions, I just take the last part of their last answer and make it the next question. Hey, we're having a big problem with our printers. Oh, when you say you're having a big problem with your printers, what does that mean? Well, they're end up jamming up a lot, and we're going through a lot of paper, and the thing keeps breaking. Oh, what breaking? Tell me more about that. Well, this one time, and now we're into a whole conversation. All I'm doing is taking their last question, asking a follow-up question with the exact information and words that they gave me, so I don't even have to be that creative. And from FBI hostage negotiators, we've learned just using their last 3 words grows rapport. Now, you got to be careful. You can't say the same thing over and over again, because at some point you become an automaton and then it gets real super uncomfortable. But for the most part, especially their important answers or important statements, I just use the last 3 words. We shared some key mindsets about effective questioning, and these are the same that we learned some key mindsets way back when in the communication section on transactional analysis. One is to be curious when we're asking questions. And that the hack there is acting as if you're seeing or hearing that or learning of this problem for the very first time. Even though you may have seen the same scenario play out 1,000,000 times, we're still acting as if this is the very first time that I'm learning of this kind of problem. Being suspicious just means we know our prospects lie most of the time. They hold back some of the information. They don't give us all the details we need to help them to protect themselves from evil salespeople. I get it. We created the problem. But is to simply be suspicious. And I always go back to that printer problem. We're having a big problem with our printers. right? And if I'm a printer salesperson, I need to be suspicious. What does big problem mean? Can anybody tell me what a big problem is specifically? Probably not. It's a relative statement, right? Well, it's a big problem. It's broken down 3 times in the last year. Oh, okay. Well, help me. Those must have been really big breakdowns. What happened during those breakdowns? Those 3 huge, well, and you find out that prospects aren't giving you all the information. So we want to be suspicious. Being tactful means exactly that. We're not getting excited when they tell us information that we could use. And I shared one not long ago about a client prospect, actually never ended up doing any work with them. But they said, we have a big problem with sales. We've taken a huge loss. I said, oh, what's that mean? They said, sales were down $1 million last year. Right? Now, if you're a sales trainer, would you get excited if your prospect tells us, man, huge problem, sales are down $1 million? Most sales trainers would go, yeah, start drooling a little bit, getting excited. The reality was they were $1 billion a year company and sales were off $1 million. Now, does anybody know the difference between $1 million and $1 billion?
1,000.
Yeah, it's 1,000. So being down 1 out of 1,000 was just a bad day, right? It wasn't a bad year. It wasn't the end of the world. And I had to ask a bunch more questions to find out that it was just this it was a very small issue that didn't need much help with, just some patience. Right. And the other thing that goes into this is having no preference of the outcome. How do we frame that in bold? What's the tool that we use to convey that we don't care which way they go?
Mutually agreed agenda.
There you go. So that's that mutually agreed upon agenda with outcomes. The first outcome is, hey, at some point, if you get the feeling we're not a fit, are you okay telling me no? It won't hurt my feelings. No. And that may come down to fake it till you make it if you really need the sale. Right? Is temporarily setting aside our own agenda, acting as if we're financially independent, we don't need the business. And empathy is trying to understand the problem from their perspective, not hearing it from our own autobiography. In fact, if we're truly trying to understand it from their perspective, it forces us to be curious and be suspicious. Absolutely forces us to make sure we fully understand from their perspective what's going on. All right. We talked about nurturing parent. This is going to be super important today. Can anybody tell me what nurturing parent means? Or what the purpose is?
You come alongside and are supportive and don't speak down to them.
Okay, I like that. Come alongside, be supportive, don't talk down to them. Anybody else want to add
Keep them
that
in
one?
the child state, right?
Say it again, Victor.
Keep them in the child state.
Yep, I'm trying to keep them in the emotional child state, the free child where they're having fun and trying to seek a solution as a little professor.
But you're
And that
keeping
is
them
perfect.
safe.
Safe, yeah.
There you go. That's my favorite 4-letter word is safe. If I could keep the product feeling safe, like I'm not trying to pin them in a corner, then they're going to be more likely to tell me the truth so we could figure out together if I could help them or not. Does that make sense? So that's the whole purpose of nurturing parent is to keep them feeling safe, but also to enable us to get the information we need to be able to help them. It's not likely you're going to run into a prospect and they're going to give you all the information freely. Go, here's all my information. In fact, here's a signed blank check for you just to fill out whenever you want. Whatever it takes to fix the problem. We have unlimited money and unlimited resources, and it's all you. That's probably not going to happen anytime in the near future, right? So we're going to have a conversation to find out all the information, things that we're going to be asking about today. And these nurturing or lead-in phrases tend to make people feel super comfortable. Things like, hey, I could be totally wrong about this. One of my favorite, hey, this is probably a crazy question. Or, hey, dumb question. Those kind of things. In fact, at the this last week, I ran into a gentleman who came to came to a sales class. He's an electrician, pretty gruff dude, really muscular dude too, kind of imposing with tattoos all over his arms and just big dude, right? And he's in class, and I said, "Can I role play with you?" And his name was Chris, and he said, "Yeah, sure." Hey, Chris, I know quite a lot about sales, and I think there's a lot that I could do to help you. What's wrong with your sales now? And he said to me with very explicative, colorful language, "You don't know S about my business. and kind of puffed up and got hostile that quick because I said, hey, I know quite a lot about sales and I think I could help you. He said, you don't know anything about my effing business. I'm like, whoa, bro. Whoa. Okay. Okay. I said, Chris, that was a really horrible question on my part. Okay to ask it again without making you mad? He said, sure. I said, Chris, I really don't know anything about being an electrician. I've learned a couple things about business that tend to help. Would it be okay if we kind of had a short conversation and figure out if there's anything I could do to help or not? He said, absolutely. That'd be awesome. Same exact question, but one worded with this nurturing parent mindset of, I'm not sure if I could help or not. You know way more about your business. Can we have a conversation? And he said, absolutely. Absent those, with the same intention of helping him, I got shut down and even cursed at in a group setting just like this.
Now, did you intentionally do that, Robert?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even in role play, if we were to role play this out individually, this is such a powerful part of BOLD and keeping people feeling safe and how we ask questions. It happens almost every time. And in fact, even in my commercial, I can say something like, hey, I help salespeople that suck, may be stuck, and need to get better. Right? Is that nurturing parent or critical parent?
Critical.
Does anyone on this call even want to stay on the call if that's what I said at the beginning of the call? Hey, I'm Robert. I help salespeople who suck, may be stuck, and just absolutely have to get better. You'll be like, you're a jackwagon. I don't want to be on your call. I'm not stupid. I'm not stuck. I don't need your help, right? Without just human nature. If on the other hand, I said something like, I typically help salespeople that are doing really well, maybe even having their best year ever, but occasionally may feel a little bit stuck or frustrated that they're not getting some of the harder deals, or sometimes feel a little overwhelmed that prospecting just never seems to end. Is any of that, is that worthwhile talking about today? Most of you can't help but go, yeah, occasionally I get stuck. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. This is so critical to what we do. I would spend some time, or at least encourage you to think about some of these nurturing parent statements and how to add them, these lead-in phrases, to make conversations go much better and for your prospects to be able to safely share. We talked about the types of questions. The first one, this positive questions, feels a lot like old school sales questions. Like that first one's one of my icky least favorites. If I could show you a way to save 15% on your car insurance, would you take 15 minutes, right? If I could show you a way to save money, if I could show you a way to better do this, or if I could show you a way to whatever, tends to be a leading question that the only positive answer is in the salesperson's best interest, and any other answer makes the prospect feel stupid. No, I don't want to save money. Okay, well, that's kind of silly, right? Neutral question, give them an or not option. So that same question, hey, I find a lot of people tend to be concerned about how much their insurance costs them. Some people want to save as much as possible and don't want to feel ripped off that they're wasting money. And other people could really care and would rather have better coverage. Do either of those make sense to talk about or not? So I could still ask the question, but I give them another version that is equally as acceptable. One version leads to doing business with me. The other one leads away from doing business with me. That makes it neutral. A negative question is, I say, probably not a big deal. Most people don't care about saving money on their car insurance. Or I'm kind of getting the feeling that you could care less, not your jam. Could care less about saving money on car insurance, probably something more important. Right? That would be a negative question. Why in the world would I use a negative question? Anybody?
Sometimes it challenges people to, I don't know, throwing out a challenge, like throw out a gauntlet or something. Would that?
Sure.
I don't know. That's just a stab.
That's a good one. I'd take that answer. Any other guesses why I'd use a negative question?
Well, see if you're wasting your time, if they qualify for you to spend the time for them, if it's worth your time and their time for their needs.
Okay, right. So I want to share an idea with you is that the prospect who acts interested and is giving you wishy-washy answers, and I think hopefully we've all been in this position where somebody kind of told us something that we didn't think was really true. Like they maybe acted interested when they weren't. Like, yeah, that's really awesome. Could you send me over some information? And you knew that it really wasn't to get more information. It was just because they weren't interested and they were trying to be nice. That's a perfect example of when to use a negative question. Hey, I kind of get the feeling, and I could be wrong, but I kind of get the feeling that you're really not interested and you just want me to send you some information because you want to let me down nicely. Am I reading that wrong? Right. So I could ask a negative question still with that nurturing parent. So I have to soften it. I have to lower my tonality, lower my volume, and make sure that I'm not being a jerk. You know, I can't ask that same question. I kind of, you know what? You're probably lying to me and you just want me to get off the phone. Right? That's the same statement, but one is said with a lot of nurturing parent and a lot of softening and slowing down. The other one was real abrasive, if you could tell the difference. Okay, so negative questions are to get your prospect moving. Or to get, so have you ever had those fence sitters that you really couldn't get a read on them one way or the other? Or they're, you know, lying to you, you get the feeling they're lying to you or they're not telling you the whole truth? That's where negative questions come in, and they need to be used very, very sparingly. Otherwise, we come across as super aggressive, identified as reverse psychology, those kind of things. I don't want to be that guy. Don't want to be that gal. This is for me to better understand the prospect situation to figure out if I can help them or not. And occasionally, when they give me BS answers, here's another one. Oh, we have an unlimited budget. Oh, okay. So even if it was $1 million, no problem. Well, I didn't say that. Well, yeah, you did, right? So I could still be negative and roll right along with them. Clarifying questions are going to come in when we don't fully understand. And they're going to use, prospects tend to hide behind vague words. And I'll give you one. A prospect says, you say, hey, should I follow up on this? Yeah, yeah, probably. We should probably have a conversation about it down the road. Now, what did I really, really say to you?
Nope.
Nothing. Now, you could go to a negative question and say, hey, usually when people tell me probably, they're really not interested. Is that what's going on? Or I could use a clarifying question and say, hey, when you say probably, what does that mean in your world? Help me understand. Help me understand is what a clarifying question is. Yeah, Gretchen. Nope, just turn your video on. Thank you. Gotcha. And then responding to questions. That's another really good question, is answering questions with a question.
Mm-hmm.
And I give an example of this is, well, how long have you been in business? How many of you have a inclination, if you would type something in chat, what you feel they want to know when they ask you how long you've been in business? Before bold, when somebody said, how long have you been in business? Guess, if you will, in chat, why they asked that question. Guess why the prospect asked that question. How long have you been in business? All right, let's see what you all put in chat over here. It's going to be fun. They've been conditioned to. I like that. They want to disqualify you. Based on what, Kurt? Too much experience, too little experience? To figure out if you're stable and successful, see how much experience you have. Victor, do they want a lot of experience or a little bit of experience? Parker, a lot of experience or a little bit of experience?
Some of them, they want that 20-year, 30-year company, it seems. And the others want to know how much you and the people that are doing it actually have yourselves. Like, I'm a 20-year technician. My company's only 5 years old. So it's kind of both ways for me.
Okay, I got that. I love it. So why would somebody want a 20-year technician?
Knows what he's doing. Is what it sounds like up front.
What's that, Victor?
Sounds like he knows what he's doing up front with the 20 years.
Okay, why would somebody might not want a 20-year technician?
Because they're set in their ways and they may not know new technology.
So the specific prospect in front of us, yeah, so time equals experience, but not necessarily. So this is what's fascinating about sales, in sales, our brains, our patterns tend to make assumptions about why the prospect asked the question. And this is the perfect example. How long have you been in business? Well, if I say 20 years, because I believe in my head that the prospect wants a lot of experience to prove that I know what I'm doing, then I'll say, well, I've been in 20 years. I have a ton of experience. Now, what I don't know is that was the prospect that wanted to make sure I didn't have a lot of bad habits and hadn't kept up with technology and the new way of doing things. I didn't know that, but I assumed that they wanted a lot of experience. Does that make sense? And our prospects do this to us all the time. Have you ever done it to a salesperson? Asked a trick question? Didn't tell them why you asked it, but we're trying to figure out if they were good or not, or maybe had new ideas or everybody does it. But we set the salesperson up to fail by asking vague questions. So the trick, the hack, however you want to look at it, is to not answer questions unless you know exactly why they asked the question in the first place. So let's play that out. Victor, ask me how long I've been in business. What's my experience?
How long have you been in business?
Oh man, Victor, that's a great question. I get asked that one all the time. And I find that some people want me to have a ton of experience, years and years and years, and other people want me to be new and have different, new, innovative ideas. Which direction do you fall?
I was just trying to find out how long you've actually been in printers.
Okay, makes sense. Is that more that you want the experience and the seasoned and the know-how, or do you want somebody that's a little bit newer and maybe has new technology in mind and innovative solutions instead of the tried and true?
For us, it's going to be more about the experience to be able to service our needs in multiple models.
Okay, so when you say service your needs in multiple models, help me understand what that means.
Just the different brands and the older, models. The printer.
Okay, so notice this. Did I ever answer his question about how much experience we have?
No.
Nope. But what did I do? I moved past the question to get to the real question. He's got concerns about multiple models and multiple brands, right? And if it was a real scenario, within 2 to 3 questions, I would get to why he actually asked that question, right? And likely I would also get to my competitors because something's going to come up. Well, this one company we used, blah, 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 blah. They had no experience and they wasted a bunch of our time and they ended up breaking some of our equipment. Oh, tell me more about that. Wow, that had to be frustrating. Tell me more about that, right? So just by clarifying, I could find out why the prospect asked the question. And within 2 to 3 questions, I'm going to get down to the root cause of why that even came up. Right? And then once I have the information, then I can frame my answer in a way that's not going to turn my prospect off. And this might be something worth writing down. The question that the prospect brings you is rarely the question they really meant to ask. And Gretchen had it in her comments. They don't know what else to say.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's not the real question that even in that role play that we just played out. And granted, it was a role play and Victor was being really nice and complying and answering questions the way he probably guessed a prospect would. Prospects don't typically, they just go, well, how much is it? Well, that's a really good question. Right? That's a really good question. Of all the things you could have asked, why price? Right? Then I can find out, well, because we don't want to spend too much, or we don't want to, we have a really tight budget. Okay, well, that's probably going to knock me out because we're never the cheapest. Can we talk about everything else but price and get back to that to see if it's even in the ballpark? Sure. Okay, now I took price off the table and we're going to talk about everything else. All right, so clarifying questions are going to get you all the details. Responding to questions with questions is going to figure out why they asked the question in the first place. Right? I'm going to give you a 6th one that's never been on the sheet before. It's questions to get them to ask a question. Questions to get them to ask a question, number 6. Right? And that could be any one of the things just to get the conversation going. And I'll give you an example. You have a first meeting with somebody and they invite you to sit down, right? So it could just be like, when I was coming over here today, we put this on the calendar. There must have been a reason you put this on your calendar, hopefully we're going to talk about. Hey, when you invited a guy in like me or a gal in like me, what comes to mind? Well, blah, 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 blah. And I get them talking. Have you ever had that experience where you're having kind of a stalemate where you're kind of looking at each other and you don't know who's going to go first, and then they end up asking some dumb question like, how much is it? All right, so let me ask you all a question. This is quiz time. Somebody asked the question, how much does it cost? Which one of these questions can you use? One, positive question. Well, you're hoping to save some money. Two, neutral.
5.
5. Why 5?
I think 4.
4 could work. 5 would be my favorite.
I would do negative.
Negative? Give me an example, Iris.
Well, I think I've heard you say it in this call. Well, a lot. We're not the cheapest.
Okay, that feels negative, but that's actually that piece of it is the nurturing.
Oh, okay.
That lead-in phrase that says, a lot more than most people are willing to spend. Kind of that disarming honesty.
Okay.
A lot more than what crazy question. When it comes to that, why are we talking about it anyway? Right. So it's a little bit of a pivot, but it could be negative. Usually when people lead with price and they find out I'm the most expensive, they usually don't want to talk to me anymore. Is that what's going on? Now I'd have to really soften that a lot, lower my voice and slow down my rate of speech. Otherwise it's going to become a lot abrasive. But usually with price, I'm just going to pivot and not answer the question. I get asked that a lot. Really expensive, more than most people are willing to spend. Can I ask you a question? What's changed recently? That's answering a question with a question. So I shucked and I jived a little bit. So I said, hey, a lot more than most people are willing to spend. That's disarming honesty. I go, what's changed recently with a question that has you even thinking about what we do? Woo, fun stuff. All right, let's get to the rest of the wheel. Let's do this. And we're only going to get through these 2 segments right here, these 3. So we've already covered personal emotional needs. That's the pains that drive people and the pleasures they seek. And if we could satisfy both of them in a single transaction, we're really not going to cover off the ball. But we need to get into some of these resource and decisions, and we're going to talk about this let's pretend conversation quite a lot. We'll spend very little time on presentation. And we'll spend even less time on we'll spend a little bit more time on the 2-question close or confirmation. And then next week, we're going to talk about introductions in this whole area right here, which are what happens right after they've converted to a client and to set up conversations. Here you go. Yeah, here it says closing the deal. Never be closing. I love that. All right, so we talked about the personal emotional needs pipeline, right? And I want to pick up with this. Let me go back for a second. I'm going to pick up with this segment right here just to frame the rest of our conversations. I don't want to get lost in the pen pipeline because we could talk a whole nother 2 hours about this stuff. How did we initially identify what pain or problem they might be having? Does anybody remember how we started the conversation to get them talking about something that might be going on in their world that we could help with?
With your 30-second presentation.
There you go. I threw a couple of grenades in the room and said, hey, I typically help salespeople that are doing really good, though occasionally they struggle with prospecting. They may be frustrated that they're not closing enough deals, or maybe they're disappointed that they're missing their big goals. Right? 2020 has been a nightmare, and they're trying to figure out how to get back on track. I just launched 4 different grenades into a room. Whichever one makes them jump, they'll self-identify. And I go, what if any of those are worth talking about? They go, oh man, 2020 has been a nightmare. Oh, so they self-identified the possible problem. And I go, well, tell me more about that. Oh, sales are down 25%. And I'm spending more and more time working and less results. Well, is 25% a big number? Right? Then I could clarify everything they just said. Well, you figured if you could get it back on track, how much does that mean? If you could, no promises, get it back on track, kind of on a monthly basis, how much would your income go up? Oh, I'd be up $5,000 a month if I could put the 25% back on it. Oh, and if nothing changes and that's just the new normal, Over the next year, how much is that going to cost you? Well, $5,000 a month times 12 months, that's 60 grand. So if it were 60 grand a year and nothing changed over the next 5 years, I'm not good at math. What is that number? Anybody?
300,000.
There you go. And I always let them do their math. Do I know it was 300,000? Yes. But I let them fill in the blanks because people don't argue with their own information usually. You go, oh, it's costing me 300,000 if this doesn't fix. Why did I get to 300,000 and not just leave it at $5,000 a month?
Because it's a greater impact number. It
Right.
kind of sticks with you more.
Yeah, most people will take a haircut of $5,000 a month. If they're making 10 grand a month and they have a couple bad months, they're down $5,000. But not many people want to take a $300,000 haircut. They're willing to do something about it. It's like when we go to the doctor and something's kind of bugging us a little bit, and they start digging around with it and poking at it and prodding it and pulling it back and asking you to do that. They're like, ow, that hurts. Okay, well, does it hurt when I do that? Yeah, that really hurts. Oh man, this is bad, right? So they want to anchor in that future impact. And then I go to ideal outcome. Hey, no promises, but let's pretend we fixed the sales issue. We've got that $5,000 back in. What's that look like a year from now? Ideally, what you want to have happen. Well, I don't want to just get the $5,000 back. I want to add another $5,000 a month. Oh, okay. Let's talk about that. Oh, so $5,000 a month, I'd be up three. So we're talking about a $600,000 swing over the next 5 years. Oh my God, that would be amazing. Right. So we went all the way from their initial pain of, hey, I'm missing out on sales because of COVID, because 2020 sucked, to now on this side, we're up $600,000 over 5 years. Do you think they might be interested in the conversation at that point? Yeah. So I've delivered them from pain to pleasure. And they go, oh, when it comes to the other things, now we've wrapped up that whole entire sales that conversation. Right. I paraphrase what happens. I say, okay, Skylar, you were talking about sales being down $5,000 a month. This is how it's impacting your family, your stress levels. We could fix that $5,000 a month over 5 years at 300,000. Ultimately, you want it to be 600,000. What did I miss? And he goes, nothing. That's it. Awesome. Okay, so all we do is go through that pen pipeline over and over again until we get tired or bored or there's nothing else to talk about. And then we transition to resources. So I want you to learn the transition questions. The transition here was 30-second commercial, got us into this conversation. What got us the transition from the personal emotional needs, the pleasure was ideally genie in a bottle, 3 wishes, whatever you want to do. Ideally, how would things look, feel, sound, taste if we fixed all this stuff 12 months from now? Right? So those are the transition questions. The transition to resources now comes into thinking about what resources are. So here they are. Here's the resources. You may want to jot this down. If you RSVP'd to the link, you got it in your email. There should have been a workbook. You can print this stuff off. But resources are team. That's this acronym up here. Time, energy, and money. Those are the 3 resources we're going to talk about. There's also another resource we rarely talk about called reputation. Time, energy, money, and reputation, if you want to go there. So time is kind of their timeline. How soon does this have to be done? If it's something that could wait a few years, there's not a whole lot of urgency. Yeah, we're thinking sometime 2025, getting a new sales program in place. Not a big deal. In fact, if somebody told me that, I'm going to say that. That's going to be my negative question. I'm going to say, well, kind of get the feeling this really isn't a big deal and you're only talking to me to be nice. Really not an issue. Oh, it's an issue. Well, 2025 doesn't scream, hey, this is a number 1 pressing concern. Does that make sense? So urgency is time. Energy is any change requires effort. Any change requires effort. If they choose to go with you, let's say Deb, let's pretend they already have a life coach, right? They're already getting some coaching and they decide they meet you at a networking event or they see you talking a Toastmasters deal and they're like, oh my God, I love this woman. I need a new life coach. She's it. If they decide to go with Deb, what else do they also have to do?
Leave the other one?
Yeah, they got to fire their old person.
Right? They have to fire the old person. Some people avoid confrontation. Some people don't like to have that call. right? They don't want to have to. So that just the energy of changing. What's your number? Who is your number one competitor? Anybody have a guess? You can put it in chat. Let's do the chat thing. That was kind of fun. Let's see what kind of answers come out. My number one competitor is yourself. All right. Status quo is Kurt. Yep. Anybody else? Who's your number one competitor? Me. All right. Because you're awesome. My alter ego competes with me just to keep it real. So my normal answer is kind of along the lines of what Kurt dropped in there, which is status quo. It's just the way things have always been. Right? We talked about patterns of our brain that are there to conserve energy. Well, if change takes energy, I just keep doing what I'm doing. Right? There's an old story of the farmer's dog. Y'all heard this story? Farmer's dog, the door-to-door salesman comes up and the farmer's sitting out on the porch, rocking in the rocking chair, a piece of straw hanging out of his mouth or her mouth. And, the dog's laying next to the chair and salesperson walks up and the farmer says, go ahead and have a seat. Hang out. So he goes, all right. So he's sitting there drinking lemonade with the farmer. And occasionally the dog just goes, rrr, rrr, rrr. And then the guy's like, man, is your dog okay? He's like, yeah, he'll be fine. A few minutes go by, the dog yelps a little louder. He's like, man, what's wrong with your dog? He'll be fine. And finally, the dog lets out just a wail, a painful wail. He's like, dude, is your dog okay? He's like, yeah, he's laying on a nail. When it hurts bad enough, he'll move. Right? And we got to realize that our prospects, whether they know it or not, are probably sitting on a nail that just doesn't hurt bad enough to move yet. Right? So if we go back to some of today's conversation, how do we get them to focus on the pain of the nail? Not everybody all at once. It gets really hard to hear you. How do we get them to focus on the pain of the nail?
Bring it to the forefront of their mind.
How do we do that, Skyler?
By making them relive it to an extent, by telling them what, typical experiences are and make them come to the realization that they're having those experiences.
Okay, so we can do third-party stories. We're probably going to ask a lot of questions, right? That's what the whole personal emotional needs pipeline was about, trying to figure out, hey, is this even an issue for you? Tell me about it. Want them to live it in real 3D, 4D, real pain. And part of that is just getting them to be willing to invest enough energy to change from the status quo. Change from the status quo. And the last one is money. Time, energy, and money. And money in excruciating detail. Like how much, from what resources, and what's the last bullet point? An approval process. And what I mean by approval process, that normally comes to, the you and the spouse. How do you make financial decisions? The last time you bought a big screen TV because it cost about $1,000, you're about to spend $1,000. How'd you make that decision? Or maybe within a business-to-business environment, you've run into spending caps. Like in my department, we're allowed to spend $5,000 without getting approval. In some departments, that number could be $500,000. So depending on what I sell, I may have to break up the deliverable into several smaller chunks that they could approve with ease. Oh, I can spend $5,000, no problem, but your solution's $10,000. Well, that sounds like phase 1 and phase 2 to me without having to go through approval process. So understanding what those landmines are in advance, or maybe they've got to move money from a money market account to their checking account. That takes a week. Right, so I want to understand all of the landmines before. Does that make sense? Which of these do you think is the easiest to talk about? Time. Absolutely. Time and energy, which is usually the most difficult for people to talk about, that they get most guarded about.
Money.
Right. I love it. So I usually end on money. I usually don't lead in when I start talking about resources. When I shift gears, we talked about all these personal emotional needs. I got them all. You got pain 1, pain 2, and pain 3. And ideally, we end up here. Well, help me understand how time looks in your world. And I'll explain to it from a sales coach perspective. Typically when somebody comes on as a client, we're talking about 2 hours a week class time, plus another hour or 2 hours a week of just practicing and role playing and hammering on their craft for a period of a couple of years. How are we going to handle that piece? And only go, oh, I didn't realize there was that big of a time investment. Well, depends on how quickly you want to improve. to get rid of those pains and get those pleasures we talked about a minute ago. I mean, can you even afford the 2 hours a week to come to class? That's a big ask. And they go, oh, that is a big ask. And we start talking about time. And next thing you know, they've told me all about their schedule. They've got their calendar out in front of them and how they're going to block it off. I'm like, okay, well, it's going to require you to invest some energy and learn some new, even thought patterns of how to communicate. That's going to take a lot of energy. And Parker witnessed that firsthand and having to say, how are you today? To did I catch you at a bad time? It's going to take energy breaking old habit patterns. And there's going to be days that you probably think this is the dumbest stuff you've ever heard or ever been on a webinar. How are we going to handle that? And they start lining out their program. You know, energy could be, you know, Victor, in your world, if you've got to rewire an office for low voltage and you've got employees all over the place, it might require displacing them to another location temporarily while you redo all their electronics in their building. You know, or they could say, hey, you're going to need to come in on nights and weekends. You know, can you do this, you know, after 8 o'clock when we shut down? You ever run into that stuff, Victor? Victor, can't hear you, man. It says you're unmuted, but you're muted. Now you're muted. Interesting. Nope, not hearing you. I'm assuming you do. It's probably almost every transaction you do because you're going in and installing things in a business. So I would imagine that's probably the case. I don't know what changed on your settings. You've just been hanging out. Well, if we figure it out later, chime in and we'll go back to that. So how do you bring up money? Any suggestions on bringing up the budget, the B word?
Just ask them what their
That's a
budget
good one.
is.
I like that one. I like some directness there. You know, I like to do a ballpark. You know, I'll say, hey, you know, typically when we look at fixing something like this, we're probably somewhere in the ballpark of, I don't know, $500 to $1,000 a month. Is that totally crazy and unheard of? Oh, no, I was kind of expecting that. I had that exact conversation with somebody yesterday, and they go, oh, that's what I charge for my coaching. They're in a totally unrelated field, and it was just, that was what she expected, was $1,000 a month. That's just normal. Right? So that was normal. But if they went, oh my God, that's a lot. Yeah, I hear that a lot. You know, why do you suppose people still buy from me? And then I let them fight with the number. I don't have to justify it. But money, I'm going to talk about all the details of money and where it's coming from, how they make those decisions and whatnot. So here's some buffering or those lead-in phrases we talked about before. When we start talking about time, energy, and money. Hey, I'm not even sure I could fix all those problems. You know, have you given much thought to how much time it's going to take to resolve those or not? You know, have you tried anything else? What have you tried? How much time did you invest in that? Do you have a timeline when this needs to be gone? You know, some people tell me, hey, we could deal with it for another year. Other times I hear we've got to have this done by the end of the week. Help me out. Where are you at? Does that make sense? Now, if somebody says, well, 2025, you know, they're probably smoking you out, right? So this is important. So tune in for a minute if you're working on something else. We just went through the personal emotional needs pipeline for probably an hour, right? We spent a good hour, 2 hours just talking about problems and ideal outcomes, right? Problems and ideal outcomes to ad nauseum. And now we've just spent the last probably 20 minutes talking about time, energy, and money. Fully developed time, energy, and money. The paraphrase part goes all the way back to the first problem. Hey, Skylar, when we first started talking about this stuff, we talked about struggling a little bit with prospecting sometimes, and you wanted to knock the cover off the ball on that, and you thought you could make another $600,000 over the next 5 years. We talked a little bit about, you know, identifying ideal clients and how to get in front of more people, and you felt if that didn't happen, that you would struggle for the rest of your career, and by fixing that, you would excel. And when it came down to time, you said you could easily invest the 2 hours a week for class, and you could easily invest another 2 hours a week hammering on your skill, even if it was 15 minutes a day, and you would block that off on your calendar. And you knew it was going to require some habits to be changed, and you were willing to invest the energy to learn new thought patterns, new language patterns. And at the end of the day, it seemed to be that $1,000 a month wasn't off the table, and you had some resources to be able to put it on a credit card if you needed to. But with the increased revenue, you fully expected within 90 days you would have the extra $1,000 a month, no problem. What did I miss? Nothing. So why do I go all the way back to pain 1, pain 2, pain 3, ideal outcome 1, 2, and 3, all of the time, all of the energy, and all of the money? Why do I go all the way back to the beginning?
It shows them that you're listening to what they're, what they're really needing, I guess.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. What else?
Well, and going back to the beginning, it's kind of like what you do in a speech. It's you tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. Meaning,
Love it.
You're just kind of reinforcing what you guys have already agreed to all along the way.
Mhm.
I love it. Absolutely. Does anybody know what that insect is on that leaf that's on the screen right now?
Is it a fruit fly?
Fruit fly.
What? There you go. So this is my joke to myself: is our prospects have the attention span of a fruit fly.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now, Victor.
Cool.
I hear you now. Let me finish this slide, and I want to ask you about that question again. Now we got sound figured out. So what happens is when we're talking to our prospects and we're keeping them in an emotional state, that takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of energy from our prospects to stay in that conversation with us and to continue being honest. Hopefully you've made them feel safe enough so it's not too draining. But if I go from problem, and now I'm talking about time and energy and investing money, at some point they forget where we're at in the conversation. They forget why we started talking in the first place. So this is why I take notes and pay attention to all of the personal emotional needs, all of the pleasures they want, ideal outcomes, time, energy, and money. And I'm just building my case along the way. And I go back and I ask them, because oddly enough, sometimes their needs change within a conversation. Now, you may have never had that happen to you, but I've had it where the prospect is thinking about all this stuff and they go, you know what? I've also been having this problem. We've got to go back and circle back. Or, I said we had $1,000 a month, but come to think of it, we just picked up this other payment that we've got to make first. And until this is paid off, we can't do it. Right? That aha moment. So I go back and make sure that there's nothing missed. The other thing I'm having them do is reinforce this whole dialogue from their own perspective. When I say, what did I miss? That opens the door for them to correct me. So does anybody know the difference between the question, what did I miss? And did I miss anything? What's the difference?
One's open-ended, one's closed.
What do you mean?
Well, if you ask, what did I miss? It initiates a conversation. If you said, did I miss it? Wait a minute.
Yeah, did I miss anything?
Yeah, did I miss anything? Then it could be a closed question, because they could say no, but if they said yes, then it opens up the conversation.
I love it.
It's kind of tricky either way.
It is.
I think it depends on the tone and the vocal variety maybe that you use.
That definitely makes a difference. I agree with that wholeheartedly. What is the question, what did I miss, assume?
That you missed something.
It assumes that I missed something. When I ask the question, when I ask it the other way and said, did I miss anything? What am I asking you to judge? Not the content. I'm asking you to judge me. Did I do it right? And most people won't answer that question honestly because they don't want to hurt your feelings. Go, no, that's pretty much it. Or if I say, well, what did I miss? To Deb's point, vocal inflection and tonality are going to make a big difference here too. But if I say, hey, what did I miss? And they go, well, you missed the fact that, we were going to have to pay this other thing off first before we could get started. Oh yeah, that's right. Or they may just be open enough to go, I forgot to say something about this because it was missed. So I assume that I screwed up. I assume that I missed something in hopes that they will fill in the blanks. And I find that prospects usually do. So these are those subtle nuances. Remember how that brain plant, these other subtle nuances of thinking, I've got to I at least consider answering questions a little bit differently to get the truth, to keep them feeling safe. Got it? This is a big one. All right. So we've rephrased everything, paraphrased everything. We've got them all on the same page. You go, nope, that's it. Right. And then the next question is super simple. So this is going to go quicker. Is who else? This is how I'm going to ask the question. I don't usually give you an exact word for word. This is one of those exceptions. Who else, in addition to you, needs to be here when we talk about possible solutions? Who else, in addition to you, needs to be here when we talk about possible solutions? Huge. Right? I want to talk to you real quickly about the number one way your prospects get out of making a decision. So you do all your great discovery. You found out about all their problems. You've got their budget, their energy, their time. You've got it all nailed down. And you come back to do your presentation, or you whip out your laptop, or you already have a canned presentation ready to go. What's the number one objection that gets people out of making a decision? Any guesses?
Do they have to talk to somebody else? They can't do it independently?
I love it. That's it. I call it the hidden decision maker. That's the number one exit door, because it's the easiest one to use and it's the hardest one for a salesperson to recover from. Now, if we've had a great conversation, we've been hooping it up, we've been having, great conversation. I've been super safe with you. I've told you all the information. And then I get uncomfortable for any reason when it comes time to make the decision. I'd be like, hey, Victor, man, this is really great information. It's a lot bigger project than I thought it was going to be. I'm going to have to get my spouse involved. I'm going to have to ask my wife. Where can he go from there if we haven't already talked about it?
Well, first, make sure I'm not choking on my soda.
Right?
Now, rephrase the question again, please.
No, if we haven't talked about who else is involved in the decision maker process, and then at the close, I then go, well, I've got to talk to somebody else. How can anybody recover from that?
Well, they can't really. I mean, you can say like who it might be, but if they don't let on, I actually ran into this where the church has a committee that wasn't really relayed to me. I actually asked, I thought, if they were the decision maker, and I just apparently wasn't listening well enough.
I love it. Thanks for being invulnerable too, man. I appreciate that. The reality is prospects lie about this one all the time. You probably did ask the question. You probably asked it perfectly. Prospects will frequently lie about this one for reasons of ego, to maintain their exit door, because they're feeling uncomfortable because you might be able to get to their wallet or purse. And there's lots of reasons, but this easiest one to hide behind. We just act like we're the decision maker. That way, when they come back, they go, I really need to talk to my wife about this one, or I need to talk to a committee about this, or this one's got to go for board review, or, I've got to take, this is a lot bigger than I thought. We're gonna have to take it to the CEO, because they get to tell you no without being mean to you and blame somebody else. Not my fault, right? So the picture to the left is a bunch of exit doors. And this is what I know about prospects, having been one lots of times, is on a subconscious level, we tend to install exit doors from the very start of the conversation, right? A salesperson shows up, or maybe we walk into a retail environment and they go, can I help you today? And we go, oh, I'm just looking. That's our first exit door from the very first interaction with the salesperson, that we installed the just looking exit door. So if they start getting pushy, or I find something that I stay too long at and they try to close me, I go, oh, I was just looking. And maybe another budget exit door is budget. Like, hey, we're not getting our tax return until, end of April or whatever. So we're going to have to come back when we get our tax return. Or maybe the exit door is, I always make decisions with my spouse. Well, if your spouse isn't there, you just installed an exit door. So my question to you is, Why do prospects install exit doors?
Feel safe.
Yeah.
Feel safe? Yep. Which means what? Why wouldn't they feel safe?
Well, if they have to make a decision and they're not sure about the decision, then they're going to install the exit door because it gives them a way out.
Absolutely. If they're not feeling, so how do we keep the prospect feeling safe where they don't feel like they need to install exit doors?
Making it totally okay to say no.
That's the first thing, is making it okay to say no. If it's okay to say no. So back when I was a kid, I grew up on a farm. And if you try to get cattle into a small trailer, they tend not to get in there. When you try to load them into the barn, they tend not to want to go in there because they know they're getting trapped. What we found is if you open the back door, even if there's a barrier to get to the back door, like a bar or a chain, they'll go gladly into the barn or the trailer. And then once they're in there, you just close both doors. It's really easy.